In this video, we're going to migrate from one SharePoint source to a SharePoint target. Now, the scenario for this type of example could be migrating from SharePoint on-premises, for example, SharePoint 2013, to Office 365, or from one Office 365 tenant to another. So for today's example, I'm going to migrate some data from one Office 365 tenant to another. So I've got two demo tenants available. This one mod 682351 and mod 731413. So the first example, I'm going to take some documents. So within this tenant, I'm going to expand it out, navigate down to the Contoso team site and load this document library here. And from here, I'm going to select 3 documents and right click and click copy. Click OK. So now I'm going to migrate those across to a different tenant. I'm going to migrate them to this tenant 682351. So click on the drop down here, drop down into the Meta 1 site collection and go down to this site here called Finance. And I'm going to paste them into this library here. So I right click and choose Paste. And that fires up the navigation wizard. So the first page shows the target. That's a target I've specified in the navigator here. So the target site URL and the target list. You can change those from here also, but I find it's easier just to select the target in the list. So I hit next. Now it's requesting the metadata at the target. So in the target, I've set up a content type called Meta1, and it has these additional fields, percentage complete, meta country, meta department, and status. So I can fill these in from here. I can put a percentage complete as 10, a meta country as perhaps Ireland, a meta department as maybe finance, and the status as draft. So the remaining fields, the title, created date, and modified date, will copy from the source. Created by and modified by will also copy from the source if we use a user map so that the system knows who those users are in the source and target and can map them together. So click on next, we bring up the advanced options. So this is where we can choose whether or not to take all versions or a set number of versions, whether to include subfolders, overwrite if a file exists, or do an incremental copy. We can copy permissions from the source as well, and in tandem with that, we also need to remap our users in order for that to work correctly. And deferring required fields will upload a document even if there are some metadata fields that are missing data. It will push it through anyway. Azure Turbo Mode is a method of migrating where the data is first uploaded to Azure and then pulled down to Office 365. So Azure is used as a staging environment, if you like, and this actually helps alleviate the throttling issues you can sometimes run into if you migrate data directly to Office 365. Applying filters enables you to filter out certain types of data based on things like, I'll have a look in here, based on things like the file extension. We can even choose size or content type to filter out from as well. And finally, there's the option here to remove web elements. So this is useful if you're migrating perhaps a SharePoint site. You can remove certain elements from the migration by entering them into a CSV. For example, this line item here will remove list view web parts from the migration. So the remaining options we have here, we've got the option to generate a script, which will generate a command line script for the job, or schedule the job to take place at a point in time other than now. So let's just check our options. We've got include versions, include subfolders, everything else is blank. So I click on finish now, and that will commence the migration. So that initiates this window which shows the progress of the migration, and from here we can review as each item is processed. When this process completes, we get a summary window, and then we can look at the log for the migration and review each item individually. Right, there we go, 3 items processed successfully. If I click on view log, we can see the outcome of that migration, and each line item has its own individual checkbox here. If I double click on one of these, I can find out more information about it. With this log, if I choose select all, I can save that as a CSV or an XML to work with it outside of the tool. So let's go and look at the outcome. So if I go to the target site, was here, Meta1, lists, subsites, departments, finance, and look into the lists here, documents, we should see those 3 documents have been migrated across. Now, if I right click on this and choose view in the browser, we can have a look at their metadata. Just sign into this tenant. And view the contents. So now we see the documents have been migrated across. And if we go and view the properties, we see that the metadata has been migrated as well. So we've got a status draft, 10% complete, department is finance, and the meta country is Ireland. Now we can do the same with a list. So I can take a list, let's take this list, confidential documents, copy that, right click and copy that, and then paste it in the other tenant. So if I just minimize this, expand this out, go down to Contoso, team, right click and choose paste. Now we get the list option. So firstly, we can change the list name. We don't have to call it confidential documents. We could call it something else in the target. Next, the list options. So we can choose to copy content types, content versions, permissions, views, workflows, and so on. Drop into the advanced options. Again, we've got the option to remap users and to filter out certain types of data. So for a simple example, let's go with uncheck copy info path forms, copy views, uncheck copy permissions, copy versions, copy content types. So I click on finish and that initiates the migration. So if I right click and choose refresh, that will refresh the view in the navigator, and you see we now have the confidential documents library that we've just migrated. Right click on that and choose view in the browser. We see the library's been migrated across, and so has all of the contents. Now if I click on one of these documents and view the details, we'll see that the content type has also been copied across and the metadata corresponding to that document. So full fidelity migration once again. So finally, we can do the same for a site. So again, if I just go into my source tenant and take perhaps the finance site, and there, right click and choose copy. And now go into the target tenant. Let's put it in Contoso team site. Right click and choose paste. And this brings up the site copy wizard. So I've got 3 options to begin with. I can copy to an existing site, so copy the content to an existing site. I can make a sub-site, or I can promote this to a new site collection. So for today's example, let's go and copy that to a new site and create a sub-site. So from here, we've got the site copy options. So things to point out here are that we can copy content types. We can also copy features. So what this does is it looks at the features in the source and then will enable them in the target if they exist there. So if you've got perhaps publishing enabled in the source, it will enable it in the target. Also copy workflows and master pages. The list copy options are the same pretty much as when we migrated the document library. So you can choose to copy lists and content, permissions and views. The advanced options here, we've got again the option to use Azure Turbo as a staging environment. We can filter, remap users, also remap site and list templates is an important one if you're coming from an older version of SharePoint, perhaps 2010. Finally, the look and feel options, you can choose whether to copy the navigation, tree view, site theme, and so on. So let's look at the options we specified. So content types, content and versions. So I'm just going to hit next. This shows a summary of the job we've specified. From here, we can generate a script for the job to run it as a script, schedule the job to run later, or simply click finish as I'm going to do now to kick off the job right now. Right, so now the migration is complete. If I right click on the Contoso team site and choose to view in the browser, navigate to site contents, you'll see under subsites, we now have the finance site we just copied. They're available to use. And we have its libraries here on the left. So I click into confidential documents and look at one of these documents, for example, this finance Word document, France, and go down to details. You see immediately the modified date is preserved. Modified by is preserved, the content type has been copied across, and the metadata. So you see we've got the status, percentage complete, and also the department. So that's how to copy a site between SharePoint. tenant to tenant. So in summary, we've looked at how to copy documents from SharePoint to SharePoint. We've looked at how to copy lists and libraries and also a complete site.